So if I had to guess, I would say majors, Bitcoin, ETH, Solana are going to be much higher. A lot of stuff is going to be a lot lower, perhaps even going higher in the interim and then going a lot lower. And then I hope to see a whole new suite of consumer apps and infra that, achieves product market fit and creates real cash flows and real value for the world.
All right, just to start us out, can you introduce yourself and maybe give us some of your background into how you got into the crypto space and how you got involved overall in crypto?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Jack Niewold. I am right now the founder of Decipher podcast, and that's kind of the main thing I'm working on right now. But I got into crypto and I started a research publication called Crypto Pragmatist, which I've since exited, and now this is kind of the next thing. So
what would you say your read on the market is currently? I see a lot of your stuff on Twitter, and you do a lot of insightful posts. Right now, looking at the crypto market, what's your read on the market?
It's kind of complicated. I've talked to, on my podcast, the last couple of times I've talked to two kind of like hyper crypto bulls. One, Josh Cornelius of Seed Club, who is like bullish on tokenization and consumer. And then before him, I talked to Anurag of Avail, and he's kind of bullish on just like permissionless peer-to-peer networks. And so I've listened to those bull cases over the last couple of weeks, and I've been like, all right, there's definitely still a lot of room to be bullish. However, you look at kind of just, kind of what I see as retail metrics. So, Twitter followings and YouTube views and content, consumption metrics. And it's hard to see a strong bull case right now, in my opinion, around just the fact that we haven't seen a lot of new investable products and theses, and kind of market mismatches around high FDV VC tokens coming to market and limited retail participation. I think the reason that the meme coin kind of craze has kicked off is really because there hasn't been a real investable asset class outside of meme coins for a lot of reasons. But once kind of retail participation flows back, then I'll be bullish. But for now, it seems like we're kind of ranging. So
yeah, the whole high FTV thing has been really disappointing, and definitely something kind of new that we didn't have in past cycles in the same way. I mean, there was raises, but it wasn't in the same way. It felt like there was always like new projects popping off out of nowhere. You could get in on the ground floor as like a new investor, and that got a lot of people excited and did generate a lot of interest. I would say, though, that I feel like there's a lot of older projects that are really solid projects that have been building, that are doing things, that have users, that have revenue, that just aren't getting a lot of attention. Why would you say that the newer why would you think that the newer projects keep getting all the attention when we have really these great older projects that are already liquid in the markets, already fully diluted, but they don't seem to get as much traction or interest?
Sure. So I have a couple thoughts here. First of all, there's kind of an industrial complex in crypto around getting attention onto the new projects. And I would say it's still profitable for VCs to invest in tokens that later get marked up 10, 20x. So the institutional pressure is definitely around new projects because there's still a lot of private investing going on, and the private investors want to push new projects. We can also look at stats like Ethereum is the only crypto that's outperformed Bitcoin over more than one cycle. So obviously that's going back pretty far. And, there aren't that many coins that were around 2 cycles ago, but it's still kind of a shocking statistic that nothing has been really able to outperform Bitcoin. So are you really going to bet that Uniswap can do that on the long term? Maybe. So I think it's complicated. Those assets are definitely interesting to me, but we look at something like Compound, which was seen as a blue chip DeFi protocol just a couple of years ago, and this kind of recent governance attack. There was a governance attack around Compound where they were targeting emissions, and they were asking for comp rewards to kind of juice yield protocols and then gain governance power over those comp tokens. And you look at something like that, and it's like, wait, this blue chip DeFi protocol, and no one's even at the helm, right? There's no one at the keyboard. Rob Leshner's off doing other things, it appears. So I think the combination of all these kind of issues around, who is still going to continue to push in the fifth, sixth, seventh year of a DeFi protocol, and the fact that other people are willing to invest more in the second version of that, and the fact that there's limited just money flowing in the space in general, it leads to this equation where people would much rather look at the new thing than the old thing.
You actually gave me a thought on that as well when you're talking. I think on two part, maybe one part could also be the fact that I feel like a lot of the media voices or like the big names in the crypto space often get a ton of VC deals. So like the newer projects, they have VC interests to push because they have some sort of stake in it, where older projects, they might not have that. And then the second thing would be that the first generation of crypto projects, after like, maybe it wasn't the very, very first generation, but like in 2017 batch, right? We had Ethereum, we had smart contracts, we had all these ideas. And if you look back, largely the majority of those projects were garbage. They were more like a white paper with an idea without any sort of execution. And so I almost wonder if people kind of learned that lesson that cycle, so that, when 2021 came around, all new projects, and they're almost trying to repeat that muscle memory of like, oh yeah, you get rid of the old projects, you go with the new projects. But there's sort of this acclimation to the fact that like some of these old projects aren't going away, like Maker, Aave. These things are generating real revenue. They have good product market fit. And so maybe it's like almost like a learning curve where the market's kind of trying to figure these things out.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. And we see projects like Maker trying to rebrand. So maybe it's partially around just kind of like being seen as new generation versus being seen as the last generation.
Yeah, have you seen all the rebrands happening? It's crazy. It's Aave.
Yeah, I guess Aave rebranded as well, yeah.
Yeah, so they just did like a new look. But Maker did the rebrand. Matic's not doing a rebrand, but they are getting a new token poll. It has to do more with the structure of the Agler and the way they do it. But I've noticed there's almost like a rotation of like older projects that are like rebranding to newer tokens or newer branding, etc.
Yeah, I think people want to invest in the new token, of course. And then also it's not like these blue chip DeFi protocols are at super low valuations. They're still all like, $1, $4, $10 billion FTVs. So do I really want to bet that Aave is going to go 10x from, $3 billion or something? Like that's kind of still a risky bet versus, some meme or something that could 100x in the next month. So I kind of understand why retail doesn't want to buy blue chip old DeFi.
Yeah, I can see it with something like Aave or Maker. I guess I was thinking, have you heard of CowDAO?
No.
Okay, it's like they have a DEX aggregator called CowSwap. It's kind of like 1 inch.
Sure. No, I've heard of CowSwap. I didn't know CowDAO was related.
Okay, yeah. So they have CowDAO. They have Cow Protocol, which is kind of like the underlying structure that CowSwap's built on. So like their intense architecture, all their solvers, network, all that kind of stuff. And so then they have their MEV blocker, and then they have their brand new Cow AMM. And so they have like this cool product set that's actually really cool. It's all like MEV protected. Their AMM actually, I didn't know this, but I guess for AMMs, the MEV capture around AMMs is actually bigger than like sandwich attacks and front running combined, which is a crazy stat to me. And so they've created this architecture because they use batch auctions that can't happen. And then they take the surplus that would have gone to MEV bots and give it back to the AMM stakers. And so, it's just all these kind of cool innovations and stuff. And they have a ton of users. They make pretty decent revenue. And so I guess it's more like things like that where I'm like, okay, this is an upcoming project. Uniswap is now copying them. So like Uniswap's entire vision for the future is just like they saw what CowSwap was doing and they're like, oh, cool. We should do intent-based architecture too. And so, yeah, that kind of stuff, I guess, would be more what I'm referring to when I say there's like good liquid market tokens that are pretty small. It's like 50 million market cap.
Sure, yeah. And I'm actually a fan of CowSwap, and I've used CowSwap quite a bit. My counter argument to that would be, I'm checking out the chart right now, and CowSwap has underperformed Bitcoin since the FTX collapse. So...
Oh no, for sure it has, and that's my whole point. Is like, why are people buying ZK Sync at $1 billion? With like, I don't know, there's not that many people using ZK Sync, and there's almost nothing to do on it. Versus like people, cow swap, which like tons of people use it. It's a great experience. And what's making people do that, I guess, is more what I was asking about.
Yeah. So I remember I used to I got into investing in when I was maybe like 12 or 13 years old, and my dad gave me $1,000 to put in a brokerage account. And he has always been into pharmaceutical stocks, like pharma, biopharm and stuff. And his kind of thesis is, and this joke is made in crypto often, that like them delivering a drug is actually bearish for the stock. Because if you have the drug that cures cancer and you're like, oh my God, we're going to cure cancer, then you can have $100 billion valuation. Then the drug comes out and it's like, well, it only cures cancer in dogs or something. And then the whole valuation collapses, the whole story collapses. So the fact that Cow Protocol has users is actually bearish, I think, versus ZK Sync, because there's a narrative in which ZK Sync becomes the entire blockchain, and then Bank of America is running their payments network on ZK Sync, and everyone has ZK Sync credit cards or whatever. While CowSwap is like, oh, we have 2,000 daily active users. So for the castle in the sky to work, the token needs to be kind of address this massive, TAM, right? And it needs to express this vision of how it's going to be the next greatest thing in the world. And that's how it can justify $1 billion valuation, where once it's grounded in reality, it's a lot harder to justify a big valuation.
I could see that. So the idea being that one has so much potential, and you don't, because it's like kind of murky, because there is really no stats behind it, that makes it a lot easier to kind of guess in the future that it could be really, really big. Or imagine in the future it could be really, really big. Where something that's more solid and you have a lot of stats around it, it just kind of sits in a plate. Like it's easier to see, so it's maybe harder to imagine. It's less vague, so it's harder to imagine it being really, really big. But with like something, by the way, I hold a ton of cows. I hold a ton of cow tokens, but I'm not unbiased here. But with something like CowSwap or whatever, like when I look at that, I think, man, Larry Fink's saying everything's going to be tokenized. And we're going to have, not tens of trillions, but potentially hundreds of trillions of dollars of assets on chain in the next 20, 30 years, right? Imagine this plays out the way that they're saying. Well, you're going to need to exchange that value. So I actually think these marketplaces like Uniswap, CowSwap, et cetera, could have a lot more potential than most people are really attributing to them today. And so with that in mind, if you imagine trillions of dollars of assets on chain and they're all being exchanged on these marketplaces, these things could be huge one day. I also think it just in general, because we haven't had an alt rotation, people are just bearish on alts, and they seem to be like bullish on memes because a couple of memes did really, really good. I guess, would you agree with that?
I do. I mean, to some extent, I do. But again, CowSwap, I remember someone was talking to me about the Intense narrative in like February. Intense, everyone's been talking about Intense for a long time. Nothing's really come of it. No real price action has happened around people investing in Intense specific, and the token is down 50% from February. So it's almost like there's like a bigger thing, which is kind of the macro retail picture, and then secondary is like if the thesis is investable in the first place. And yeah, I mean, I'm kind of bearish memes as well. So it's not just that I'm bearish DeFi, but I think it's hard until that kind of DeFi techno optimist comes into the marketplace and says, hey, this is something that's interesting to me. I want these cash flows from the tokenization of real world assets. It's hard for me to justify kind of buying something like that.
Yeah, I could see that. And just to clarify for Intense, you mean price wise? Because tech wise, if you look at something like a cross, I don't know if you've used a cross lately, but it's crazy. You can bridge between chains in like sometimes it's like 4 seconds to bridge between chains. And it used to take like 20, 30 minutes. So Intense-based architecture on a tech level has delivered, but price-wise for like as a narrative, it definitely has not popped off.
Exactly. Yeah. That's totally fair. And I mean, yeah, there's been crazy technological advancements in the last year. Like 2021 to today is the night and day for kind of what we can do in the space. But, price doesn't reflect that. So
as far as alts go, do you think we're going to see an alt season this cycle, or like this year, or like, I guess, when would you imagine that's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a macro expert by any means, but my kind of model of this cycle has been that there's been a majors driven cycle around Bitcoin and ETH from, about a year ago to maybe a February-ish top, in kind of sentiment and money flowing into the space. And that's around institutional interest. And those dollars have percolated a bit around this space, but mostly to memes. And that's not reflective of a new paradigm, but just reflective of a new narrative and people kind of finding a shelling point around what they can kind of crowd into to boost valuations and to make money. And I think there's very little new retail participation, and most of it, if there is any, is just some retail coming into memes and people flocking to memes that were already in the space. So until like my confirmation around a bull run is actually more based on like social media statistics and like the average guy on the street wanting to talk about crypto than like any price appreciation for these assets, because that's what I see as necessary to lift up an alt cycle or something. Is we need people who are kind of in it and they are curious about the tech and fundamentals.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like there's almost this disconnect on Twitter between like retail. What is retail? Like, I see a lot of posts where they're like, we are retail, Anon. Retail is here. You're the retail. The cycle's over. But I feel maybe it's a differing definition, but in my mind, exactly what you said, which is retail is like the average person being interested in crypto, and then like crypto being cool again. And so without crypto being cool again, like when I'm embarrassed to tell the person next to me on a flight what I do for a living, retail is not back until like
exactly.
It just isn't until I can be like, yo, I'm in crypto, and they're like, wow, okay, Dean, come over here. You gotta talk to this guy. He's in crypto. Yeah. Until that happens, like retail is not back, because that's how it is when retail's here. So I totally agree with you. Do you think, I don't know if you follow like the 4-year cycle pattern and all that, but what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think the 4-year cycle is going to be a thing this time? Or do you think that's broken and that's just not a thing anymore?
That's a good question. I think one thing I learned from this kind of recent market in the last year is that you don't have to buy the bottom to benefit from a bull market. So, I mean, obviously I have long-term holdings and stuff like that, but the majority of money in a bull market is made at like the very end of the cycle or the very end of the pump kind of. And that's why like the meme of if you screenshot your P&L, then you need to exit the market immediately. That's why it's so true, because it's like you will reach your new high level of net worth the moment before the market tops. And it's just kind of by nature. But, looking to 2021, right? It was like the end of the market, Solana rotation, Danny Sesta coins, Ohm forks, all this stuff were tremendous opportunities to make like millions of dollars, and many people did. And it was all situated in the last 3 months of that cycle. So I don't think, obviously, continue to invest in the space, continue to accumulate majors, stuff like that. But it's almost around like positioning yourself to understand the space, to create a better network, to, perhaps do some angel investing right now than to try to like predict the long-term trend in DeFi or, AI, because I don't think the opportunity really emerges until you see it on Twitter and it's like a 1 month boom and everyone makes $1 million or whatever.
So would you lean more towards the 4-year cycle is broken then?
Oh, sorry. I kind of went on a tangent, I guess, after that question. So I don't think about cycles. I guess is what I would say. I wait till a bullish kind of confirmation, if I can say that. And once I see kind of that retail flow, that capital flow back into the space, then I'm willing to kind of be bullish. And until then, it's hard to justify saying, the bull run is right around the corner, the golden era. Like, I don't think necessarily that's even, as an investor, that's even necessarily what we need to think about.
Got it. So you're like reducing your risk you're taking on by saying, hey, I'm just going to relax. I won't capture all the upside, but maybe you get like 60% or 70%. And you're like, that's amazing. But I'm offsetting like this massive potential of losing 99%.
Exactly. And like Jordy Alexander talks about the idea of he's just trying to double, I think he said double his portfolio once a year. And if he can double his portfolio once a year, he's on track to be like a gazillionaire by the time he's 44 or something. And there's so much opportunity in the space. And I think like if you look at people, they're getting wrecked because they don't realize that this is a marathon and not a sprint. So yeah, I kind of want to reframe how I think about the space. And I think a lot of the way we talk about the space is in over very, very short time frames.
Yeah, that's true. Because like, last year it was like restaking was going to revolutionize the world, and it might still, but it feels like that narrative's kind of died. And, a couple months ago, it's like meme coin super cycle, and now that's dead. And, in 2022, it was all about perps platforms, and all these perps platforms were the best thing ever. And it feels like that narrative's dead. So the narrative rotations happen fast, and you really do got to stay in it for the long run and stop playing the short-term games and look at like, I think Tron's maybe an interesting example of like, it did have revenue. It does have a ton of users because it's Tether. And over the last 2 years, it's actually done really, really good. But you had to wait like 2 years of just slowly holding. And same thing with Bitcoin, right? It's just like since 2020, late 2022, the Bitcoin's done really well. Even ETH has. Like, obviously, Bitcoin's outperformed. But if you threw your money in there and you just waited over the last 2 years and didn't really worry about the dips and everything, like you're up a lot and you're doing really good.
Yeah, if we look at kind of the idea of market beta, then we can assume that under kind of bearish circumstances, pretty much everything will underperform ETH. And people will always have this kind of FOMO bias of, I want to buy the thing that everyone else is buying and making money on. But I think in the media, that the amount of people making money being early to a narrative in a bear market is very low. So I think a lot of it is kind of this like reflexive sociological phenomenon around like, oh, I aped this meme coin, I saw someone else with $1 million in their Phantom wallet, so everyone must be making money, where it's not the case. So in that case, I should hold majors, and I should view it as like I'm accumulating chips, and then once there is a golden bull run, if there is, then I have opportunities to capitalize then when money is coming into the space. Otherwise, it's kind of this PvP environment as people talk about.
What's your current read on ETH?
Bullish. I don't know why the biggest smart contract platform in the world by, let me check. Solana's at 65 billion by 5 times is bearish. I know people talk about ETH being like the dud coin, the new, stable coin or whatever, but I continue to be bearish on ETH, and I think that
bullish on ETH. You said bearish.
Oh, sorry, bullish on ETH. Yeah, it continues to be attractive to like this retail investor that I'm talking about. They're going to come in, they're going to say, oh, okay, what can we do with this space? Oh, Ethereum. Oh, this is an asset that can capture the upside of the entire kind of on-chain economy. Great. This is an investable thesis.
Yeah, I agree. But I've been bullish since the merge. Like in my head, I looked at the merge and I was like, cool, like Bitcoin halving, it always spurs off this bull run for Bitcoin. And that's a 50% cut in emissions. The merge was like over 100%. Like it went deflationary for a good period of time. And so I thought, okay, cool. Like give it 4 or 5 months, we should have a supply shock. ETH should like outperform. And that never happened. But to be fair, we also had the Bitcoin ETF get announced like a couple months later, and that ended up being a big deal. And I think that led to Bitcoin outperformance. And if I'm right, and if that's true, now that we have the ETH ETF, and once we get out of the outflows, we should start to see some ETH outperformance over the next 3-4 months. We'll see if that's the case, but that's my theory.
I mean, I would challenge you to find a coin that's outperformed ETH since September 15th, 2022. because ETH is 2x, and I think a lot of coins have not outperformed ETH since then. Obviously, there's the ones that everyone talks about because they've appreciated in price, but overall, like I bet total altcoin market cap is down relative to ETH, and a lot of people are holding altcoins that have gone nowhere.
Yeah, a lot of people point to Solana, but it overcorrected and then it came back. I think Bitcoin is a rightful gauge though, and Bitcoin has outperformed. Although I feel like if you're farming airdrops, because I was farming a lot of airdrops with my ETH, you probably got pretty close. Like I made a lot of money farming airdrops, so I feel like that did offset.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that did offset a good amount of it.
So Solana, September 15th price $33 and ETH was 1,300. So ETH is up 2x and Solana's up a little less than 4x. Yeah, it's outperformance for sure, but it's not like, oh my God, like, compared to the numbers we typically see in crypto, right? Like, I'm not mad at a 2x on my money over 2 years.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. Yes, you're not mad at it. Solana's definitely done really great. And, not only just on price performance, but like as an ecosystem, they've captured a lot of attention. They actually have some good apps, not the meme coins, right? But like outside the meme coins, they have some good apps being built on it. And I think they will do well. But I do think a lot of people are discounting what ETH is built in the layer 2 thesis. And I think, it's not even really one of those things you have to argue about. It's just one of those things that you've given it enough time and let it play out. It's really hard. It's like Solana versus a million L2s. And I just don't see how, over the long haul, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. I just don't see how you win when that's the thesis, right? Like even if 90% of those suck, a couple of them make small improvements, the rest adopt those small improvements. And it's like each one comes out with an innovation that like just over time, you get this really robust network of chains, especially as they start tying together with some sort of interoperability standard. Very difficult to beat that sort of thing. I think of like a phone developer making all their apps in-house versus an app store where, anyone can make apps.
Yeah, I think part of what you're getting at here is the idea that like if I want to invest in Solana, I can invest in Sol. If I want to invest in ETH, I have to pick between the bazillion L2s and ETH as an asset. And I think
no, that's actually what I wasn't saying that. I was saying the opposite. I was saying it's bullish for ETH that there's a lot of L2s because from a design standpoint, you have a lot of experimentation being built on top of Ethereum. And those experiments, because there's so many of them, you're just inevitably going to get faster improvements across the board because you have more experimentation happening at the same time.
Right. I guess, too, if we imagine like a Blockbuster app on Arbitrum or something, then some of that value will accrue to ETH.
Yeah. And it's, for me, I look at it more as, I've talked about this before, but it's like, there used to be apps built on Ethereum, right? And now we've switched to chains being built on Ethereum. And what I think is going to happen in the future is as we get interoperability, we get things like the AG layer and the superchain, et cetera, it's going to switch from like generalized chains like Optimism to specialized chains and app chains. And so pretty soon it's going to be app chains built on top of Ethereum, which is essentially right where we started in the first place. Mm-hmm. It's going to be full circle. So the value is in exporting ETH. ETH gets exported to all these chains. It's used as money. People underestimate the value of like having ETH as money. And I think that is the killer use case. I think block space and all this stuff is going to go very, very, very low, very cheap. And in aggregate, it's going to be like, how far did you export your asset as money? And that's where its value is going to come from.
Yeah, I think that's a strong thesis. I think like if we look at historically what has been money in the crypto space, it's always been ETH. And just this, to me, the Sol is kind of this bubble fueled by meme craziness. And the fundamental picture of the space is still ETH is the dominant asset across how most people view the ecosystem.
Have you ever used PancakeSwap?
I have.
It's surprising to me. They still do like, it's like $1 million or $2 million in revenue a month. Did you know that?
That's crazy. I haven't used PancakeSwap in the last year plus. That's for sure.
They're just such a fun experience versus like the rest of crypto. And I've always thought that was a really good user experience as a whole, especially for retail. It's like it made everything like a kid's video game and just really fun and simple. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot that crypto can learn from PancakeSwap. And just it's in like the fact that in like the hardcore crypto circles, no one talks about it. Like the who's who, right? but like there's a ton of retail and a ton of users on PancakeSwap to this day.
Yeah, I think that's probably because of just like the lack of mind share around BNB right now, Binance Smart Chain.
What tokens are you excited about right now and why?
That's a good question. Honestly, mostly I've been accumulating majors and doing some angel investing, so I think a lot of the tokens aren't liquid right now. But there's a lot of cool kind of verticals that I'm really interested in. I think emerging markets are going to be a very exciting place to participate in crypto, and I think crypto's real value, add exists. The case for crypto adding really real value to the world is a lot stronger in emerging markets. So some of these apps that are targeting those emerging markets, which actually ZK Sync I think has a big like BD push in Argentina, then those are interesting verticals that I'm interested in, and I think a lot of value will be captured there. And then, so yeah, emerging markets, consumer apps. I'm super bullish on stuff like, people talk about Pump.Fun as a consumer app, and I think it is to some extent, but Pump.Fun to me has just shown me and the market that consumer-facing apps that provide a unique experience that don't necessarily need to have tons of VC funding can end up creating, millions and millions of dollars of value for users per day. So I think, perhaps Friendtech, Pump Fun both showed that, and they're not perfect versions of that, but I think we're going to see an explosion of apps like that can capture millions of dollars of value in user activity per day and will deliver some interesting value add experience to those users.
It's funny you mentioned it. So I'm really bullish. I feel like I'm almost alone in this, but I'm really bullish on-chain gambling. So not just like stake.com and all that kind of stuff, but specifically on-chain gambling. And the reason I'm so bullish on it is Pump.Fun, if you think about it, is literally just gambling. It's just like gambling with meme coins. And, and that was like one of crypto's biggest breakout apps. The other one has been Polymarket, which is also just gambling, but you're betting on like, random world events, etc. So I feel like there's just a really decent product market fit in the gambling sector. But it just hasn't been realized because for one, a lot of these like crypto gambling platforms are really shady. But I think some form of on-chain gambling where you don't have, like, you probably wouldn't have any sort of KYC need because it's all on-chain, it's all permissionless. I bet you could build something pretty epic in that arena. So that's when I've been actually pretty bullish about that, just thinking through it and thinking through, okay, there's already a product market fit here. It's just a matter of time before we see this kind of come to light and become something, that's maybe a little bit bigger in the space.
Yeah. Sports books are a big area that I'm kind of curious about here, is why we haven't seen a big sports betting platform come on chain due to jurisdictional issues with conventional sports betting platforms. I think a kind of counter thesis here is that, if you're a sports book and you're making a lot of money, why create a token then? Because you're making, like, it's kind of like the Pump Fun thing. It's like, why would Pump Fun drop a token if they're making millions of dollars a day anyway? So we need to make sure that these things are tokenizable and will be investable by, the typical investor.
I think on-chain has some significant advantages. For one, you're not going to need licenses and all that kind of stuff because, again, it's just code running it. So you're going to bicep all that. For two, you're going to be able to share liquidity across apps, especially if you build like more of an ecosystem model. Think of like almost like an internet of gambling in a sense, where you have like more of a platform where you can then build, you can build any prediction market app with one of our CDK kits or whatever. And then you can build a Pump.Fun type app with a CDK kit, or a futures app, or a casino app. And then all of them kind of tap into the same liquidity sources, because that's the hard part about a thing like Polymarket, is you need really deep liquidity for it to really work well. So I think you could attract builders to, like, they're competing to get the best users, to do the best marketing, to do the best branding, and put their own spin on it. But the infrastructure layer is pre-built out, providing a lot easier to come and launch these things. So I think that'd be the bull case for something like an on-chain gambling thing.
Yeah, for sure. I was kind of referring to whether it's worth not. I think I obviously understand the on-chain, the value add for on-chain. I just was kind of referring to the idea if you can you can create an on-chain app and not issue a token. So, like, I don't know. I hope Pump Fund issues a token, but they haven't so far. And I know a lot of people would be eager to invest in the Pump Fund token.
Oh, I know too, but yeah, that'd be tricky, especially if they're, because the SEC and all that kind of stuff, and they're already making like they don't need money.
Exactly.
They don't need money. They're making
right?
so much money.
Yeah. So if you do create the killer consumer app, why not just benefit from the cash flows you're creating and not expose yourself to like the SEC headache?
Yeah, but to be fair, if the SEC would kind of loosen a little bit on the regulations, then why not launch a token? Because if you launch a token, that's like that much more money you have available to keep expanding and keep growing. But right now, it is such a risk. What do you think crypto looks like, say, in like 5 years' time? Like, kind of fast forwarding, looking at the space, how it is today. Where do you think we are in 5 years?
That's such a hard question. I'll say kind of my hope for 5 years, and I don't know if crypto will look like this in 5 years, but my hope would be crypto is being widely used as a platform. So what I mean by that is currently people use crypto apps because they're crypto apps, if that makes sense. So I am in crypto, so I'm going to look for cryptocurrencies to invest in. I'm going to look for crypto projects to airdrop farm. I'm going to look for crypto products to use because I am in crypto. What I hope to see in the next 5 years is people coming to platforms that are crypto because that's the best choice for the platform. So, they're saying, I'm going to use Polymarket because it's the most liquid, most user-friendly prediction market over Kalshi because it's simply a better product and it's easier to use for me and it's more liquid. Or I'm going to use X consumer app around SocialFi over Twitter, or I'm going to use Farcast over Twitter, stuff like that, right? Where it's like crypto's value add is being created, manifested by its users making product decisions that have nothing to do with the underlying technology.
I hope for that as well, especially like you mentioned earlier in the developing countries. I think there's a lot of adoption happening there, at least from what I'm seeing, especially around stable coins, et cetera. But a lot of improvements that could be made to just like the core infrastructure. And then seeing that go from third world countries and just emerging markets to places like the US and Canada and the UK, et cetera. And I think that would be pretty awesome. And last question would be 5 years from now, same kind of vein. Do you think crypto is way higher or is it way lower?
I think it's quite sector dependent. So if I had to guess, I would say majors, Bitcoin, ETH, Solana are going to be much higher. A lot of stuff is going to be a lot lower, perhaps even going higher in the interim and then going a lot lower. And then I hope to see a whole new suite of consumer apps and infra that achieves product market fit and creates real cash flows and real value for the world. And I hope to see that be competitive with equities, for example, something like that.
I love it. It's a great answer. Well, it's been great having you on, Jack. As always, none of this was investment advice. None of this was us telling you to invest in crypto. I talked about Cow. I own and hold Cow tokens. But as far as everything crypto goes, you should know it's risky. You always need to do your own research, and you really need to know your stuff if you're wanting to jump into crypto.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate your time and enjoyed chatting.